Hello and welcome to the Rejuvenate Podcast. I'm your host, Krissy Hawks, and I'm here with my co-host, Elwin Robinson, the creator and founder of Genetic Insights and the author of the Rejuvenate Blueprint. This episode is part 2. We are carrying on the conversation about biofeedback devices. If you haven't checked out part 1, the link will be in the description below, so please check that out. And so today we're carrying on the conversation, discussing wearables and some other items. So put your seatbelts on. And here we go. Elwin, I'm going to hand it over to you to get us started on more biofeedback devices.
Thank you, Krissy. And so, the central premise of this is that it's good to test that your own subjective feelings and sensations are great to check in with and often are very helpful, but also they can be deceptive. I gave an example last episode. Maybe you feel cold, you check your temperature, and it's actually 37, 98.6. Maybe other times you feel hot and bothered, and you check your temperature, it's 36.2 or 97.0 or whatever. And that's helpful information because that tells you what's going on. And so we'll talk about probably the most helpful type of biofeedback that's readily available to everyone these days, which is like wearables. So this is like a Fitbit, Apple Watch, Whoop, or as I wear, an Oura Ring, and we'll be discussing the relative pros and cons of using them at all, and what can be gleaned from them, and is it worth it, and all the rest of it. But I thought, what, if we discuss those, I know what people are going to be talking about immediately is going to be EMFs, and which is actually a good point, and it's an important subject in its own right. And that reminded me that actually, I think let's talk a little bit about kind of biofeedback as well, but in relation to environmental testing. There's some things that you can easily test in your environment that can help give some feedback to you as well about what's going on for you, and which is just worth checking in with. So it's not quite biofeedback, it's environmental feedback, but the interaction between the environmental feedback and your own bio sensation can give you some useful data as well. So before we get into any of that though, let's talk about EMFs. So are they a big deal? Are they dangerous? I think on these episodes I've mentioned before Elon Musk a few times. I've mentioned RFK Jr. a few times. These are people who, as far as I'm aware, both have very opposite opinions about this. So Elon Musk and a lot of these tech people, EMFs are fine, not dangerous at all, not big deal. That reflects, of course, the mainstream medical establishment, the mainstream science establishment. They all say it's nothing, it's no big deal. But then there is, a significant part of the alternative health world that considers them to be a very big deal, and also, I guess you could call it the conspiracy world. For instance, there are a lot of people who felt that all the significant health challenges that we've had the last 5 years are actually caused by 5G towers, for instance, rather than a virus or anything else. So that's the kind of gamut from like, it means nothing to it's killing us all. And then I suspect that a lot of the people who are viewers here are probably more in the middle, like it's probably not great, but it's not the end of the world. And that's kind of where I lie as well, but I don't just want to give an opinion, because that's not what this episode's not about. Opinions. This episode's about bio, and I've now extended it to environmental feedback, and it's this. I strongly encourage people to not just read articles about how EMFs are bad for you, or electric radiation's bad for you, or Wi-Fi is bad for you, or all of this kind of stuff. I encourage you to actually, if you can possibly afford it, to get a device and actually test. Because I chose to do this about a year ago, and the results were very illuminating to me. Now, I'm someone who had never really noticed this. Remember a group that you and I used to be part of, Krissy? I can't remember if you were there that day, but they were like, they had some EMF blocking thing and turned it off and on, and they were saying, can you notice the difference? And like everyone else was saying yes. I don't know, maybe they didn't all believe it, but and I'm like, no, I really can't tell any difference between it being there or not. So I'm not super sensitive to it. I have slept on a grounding sheet for the last 16 years, I think, pretty much always. And I was always under the impression and belief that grounding substantially reduced any potential damage or any potential issues from electric radiation, electromagnetic radiation, etc. And so, and with, I suppose I should explain what it is. So, a grounding sheet, basically, for anyone who isn't aware, is it's this idea that electrical systems tend to have to be grounded. They have to be earthed because otherwise they are, potentially dangerous. I can't even explain, to be honest, like exactly how it works, but it basically, like if there's any excess electrical charge, it goes down into the earth and it's not a problem. It can become a problem if that is not the case. This is the third pin in plugs. I know in the UK, pretty much every socket has 3 pins. I remember when I first spent time in the US, one of the things that shocked me, Krissy, is how many sockets over there you guys have that just only have 2 pins, and how it always looked like the plugs are like half hanging out of the sockets, which you don't have in the UK. And it's like I was like, you know what, the US, you guys invented electricity, but I think in the area of sockets and plugs, the UK has you beat. That might be one of the only areas. But anyway, so the grounding, that third pin that you are probably familiar with, that's grounding. And so you can actually ground yourself as a human, and there's like books about it. I think the most famous one is Earthing by is it a cardiac surgeon or something like that. And there are a certain small subset of people who are extremely sensitive and who get very sick due to this electromagnetic radiation. And many of them, and not all of them, find that grounding substantially reduces it. And you can obviously be grounded by putting your feet on the earth or getting in the sea or any of these kind of natural things. But you can also, if you are sleeping in a bed in a room, like most people, you can create that connection between your bed sheet and the earth with an electrical wire. And so that's what I'm talking about.
Elwin, when somebody is earthing or grounding, what is it that's happening to their body?
So, not an expert, but my understanding is that all of this free electrons, this positive charge, I guess that would be called free radicals, like build up. And when there's this electrical connection to the earth, that they can discharge. And so that's something that they can measure. So one of the things they measure is inflammation for people who are and aren't grounding. One of the other interesting things, and I know it's a little bit not considered proper mainstream science, but looking at a live blood culture of someone before and after grounding, even just say half an hour, and you can see that the tendency of the red blood cells to stick together, which tends to happen more under conditions of oxidative stress, is substantially reduced when a person has been grounding for even a short period of time, like half an hour. So localized inflammation goes down in the areas of grounding, systemic inflammation goes down in general. And yeah, my understanding is this discharge of troublesome electrical particles. I believe it's free electrons. That's what's going on. And so when you're not grounded, this discharge of the electrons can't happen.
Okay. And then, so I know within these certain wearable devices as well, like we're emitting, and our phones and our laptops and things like that. So we're emitting like a low level of radiation. And so is that something that we really need to be, hot on and make sure that we're limiting our exposure? I mean, if somebody is wearing a wearable, how detrimental to their health could that be?
That's a great question. And so, yeah, that's what I was about to share the story of before I did the digression on grounding. I decided to, again, I like to base things on testing in reality, not just hearing people's opinions. And so I decided to get a device to test this for myself. I didn't get a super expensive one. I got one that's about $100. But, it's like a reasonably helpful and accurate one. I believe that it's reasonably helpful and accurate because it's, first of all, the results are replicable, like it just doesn't give random things. And second of all, they are, they kind of logically make sense when you really think about it. And so this one tests electrical frequencies, radio frequencies, which is, I think, things like Wi-Fi and 5G comes under that, electromagnetic frequencies, and radio frequencies, I think RF. No, wait, did I say that already? Radio frequencies, electromagnetic, electrical, and a fourth one, but I don't remember it because I think it doesn't come up as often. And so what I found is, yeah, if that it can measure substantial radiation, but it really is very strongly inversely proportional to the exposure. So what I mean is, for instance, in a lot of rooms, you get like wires going through the walls between the different sockets. It makes sense, right? So if you put this tester right close to a socket or any of the wiring going to the socket, it shows a really high reading. But you really don't have to move it that far away for that reading to be a lot lower, like massively lower, maybe a tenth as much or a hundredth as much. And so this is worth checking because, for instance, you may, like many people, have a bed and you may have the head of your bed right up against the wall. And if that right up against the wall has an electric cable running right through it, you might actually genuinely be being bathed in electrical radiation that may be messing with your own electrical system, because human beings are electrical systems. The heart, particularly the cardiovascular system, is like an electrical system almost before it is a physical system, which is why you can bring someone back to life just by giving them an electric shock, right, in essence. So this is a big deal, having your electrical system messed with. And if you are actually genuinely close to, again, the cabling of your home, or obviously that's not the only kind of cabling, if there's some...
What about like a substation or something like that, or the electrical power lines?
Like electrical power lines. So again, I'll get to electrical power lines for a sec, but yeah, electrical substation, it just, the degree that it sticks out of the wall is, how much closer it's going to be to you, but it's not really a big deal. I was going to say, though, you might not have your head near the wall, but you might have, I don't know, something plugged in, like a light or something that's where the electricity is still going through. And so any kind of cabling, doesn't have to be in the wall cabling, any kind of electrical cabling, if it's very close to you, that radiation could still be contacting you. And so, but I encourage you not to freak out if you realize that's the case for you. I encourage you to test it with one of these devices if you possibly can. If it's outside of your realm to afford it, try to crowdsource it, because this is not something you need to use every day. So club together with friends, family, people in your neighborhood, people you work with, whatever, put in $10 each or something like that. Get one of these devices. You can have an agreement. You each use it for a week and then you pass it on to the next person. Like, I'm saying it is possible, and it's really because you don't, again, probably once you've used it, you won't have to use it again unless you move house or make some significant remodeling or something. So find out for yourself. So that's with electrical things. Now with the RF, there's kind of a lot of worry about, oh my God, if I leave the Wi-Fi on at night and I'm bathing in it and all the rest of it. From what I could see, unless you are, again, sleeping right on top of or next to a modem or a router or something like that, it's not such a big deal. What is a big deal is how close you have a device that is picking up those transmissions to you. So meaning phone, tablet, laptop, anything like that. The closer the testing device is to that, the higher those levels are by far. So yeah, if you have a phone and you've got it in your hand and you've got it in front of your face, that is a lot of that radiation that you're being bathed in. And it's hard to explain the extent of this, is where I encourage people to do their own testing, but it's in orders of magnitude so much higher, like, meaning, I'm not sure exactly what the figures are, but I'm pretty sure that half an hour a day of having any of those devices within, say, less than a foot of you is more than being bathed in the Wi-Fi of a house or an office or whatever 24 hours a day. Like, it's just so much stronger when the device is actually near you. That's what I saw through testing, and that's something to be aware of. And what do you do about it? Well, you may be using the device sometimes and not be on the internet. Maybe you're reading something, an article, or whatever. You can just go and flip that phone or whatever device into airplane mode, like cut off any of that. It will still be bathing you in electrical and electromagnetic radiation, but at least it won't be bathing you in radio frequencies like Wi-Fi or 4G or whatever. So that is a way of, reducing that. Another thing that you can do to reduce that is grounding. I actually I already knew that, like, when you ground, you can tell the difference. There's like a testing device that they often sell you with these grounding sheets, like, that shows the level of electrical pollution or radiation or whatever going down. It's the same device that's used by electricians to test that their grounding gear is working because they have to use it for safety purposes. But I found it's actually very effective. So if I am in my bedroom and I have a phone in my hand and then someone else is testing if I am not touching my grounding sheet, there's loads of electromagnetic radiation and RF and electrical, all of them. As soon as I'm touching the bed and grounded, that radiation goes down by a factor of at least 10. So there's something about grounding that makes a massive difference. But again, I don't expect you to believe me. This is what I'm saying. It's a good idea to test it and see for yourself. I was shocked at how much of a difference it made, and it explains why I'm not bothered by any of these things, despite being sensitive to other things, because I ground. I mean, I try and ground during the day as well. I'm often outside, walking around in barefoot, even when I'm doing calls and stuff, as Krissy knows. I try not to sit down in front of a screen unless I have to. But, still, I'm not claiming it solved all my issues, but one thing it does seem to have helped with is I'm not bothered by these frequencies, maybe because I'm grounded. So that's another thing that was interesting. So another thing is, I saw a thing about electric cars. We have an old Tesla Model S, and it's like, oh my God, you're being bathed in electrical magnetic radiation. It's you're sitting on top of a big magnet, which is technically true. Like, it's terrible for you. I'm like, oh, maybe that's true. I don't particularly enjoy being in a car. Never have, though. I don't think it's specific to the electric car, but I'll test it. Go in there. There's almost no radiation of any kind. It's like, again, so now if I put it right now, Teslas tend to have a screen. If I put it right next to the screen, it's got some radiation, although actually less than a laptop or something like that, interestingly. But yeah, it's like, it's just all around the seat. I'm like checking, nowhere is there like this massive dose of any type of radiation that this thing can register at least, which is interesting. Now, why does that matter? Because so many people, I think, maybe the kind of people who watch and listen to this kind of thing have a lot of anxiety about this. Like, you're being told these things are deadly, these things are dangerous, they're destroying you this, and all the rest of it. And as I said, it may be true. It's true from what I've measured, like sleeping with your head right next to, electric wires, not good. Obviously, sleeping with any part of you, but let's say your head next to a router or a modem, not good. Like spending hours and hours a day with any kind of device, by your, even, I'm saying like this, but even worse, like people hold phone up to their ear. Yes, you are kind of cooking your brain. You can see that because if you put this checking thing right up against the phone as your ear would be, you can see it bathing it in loads of radiation. So that's true, right? So I think most people massively overestimate the amount of ambient radiation from cell towers, to go back to your question there, Krissy. Like, although again, if you're living very close, but from what I've seen, you have to be really close. Like the fact that it's, 50 meters away, I don't think it picks it up. But yeah, if it's like right outside your bedroom window, yeah, then it may really make a big difference. I haven't had the opportunity to test that. So I have the opportunity to like walk up to it and see at what point it does make a significant difference. But based on everything else I'm looking at, I think it's inverse square or something like that. Like being 1 foot away and 3 foot away from one of these things. 3 foot away is not a third of the radiation. It's like a tenth of the radiation or something like that. There's something about the closer you are, like the way stronger the radiation is, but also then the further away you are, the way weaker the radiation is. And so to go back to the wearables, this is a concern because we're talking about something that is on you the whole time, right? So it just talked about maybe the whole, like 4G floating everywhere, all of that kind of thing is not such, or the power cables near your home or whatever, not such a big deal maybe in most cases. But I just said if it's right against your body, then it is causing an impact. And so so that is why when I looked into the different devices, I was very surprised to come to the conclusions I did. But you know what? I'm going to tease that one and talk about a few other environmental ones before I come back to that.
Perfect. I mean, yeah, because it is one of those things I know with modern day technology. I mean, it's something that we all have to consider. It's something that we have to be aware of, especially if there could be something underlying and maybe people aren't thinking, oh, it's that, there's so many people that sleep with their phones by their bedside plugged in at night using them for alarms, or they're on them right before they go to bed, and then they put them there. So with that plugged in, it's that proximity that you're talking about. So it's just, again, it's awareness. It's, will you feel it? Maybe not like feel it, but over time, limiting that exposure could be, beneficial. But yes, we'll get to the wearables in a second. So talk to me a little bit more about the environment biofeedback that we want to get into.
Yeah, and just to kind of conclude your point, that's the value of testing, because it's all very well hearing from this person this, and I'm just another person who's told you another thing right now. I realize that. So I don't expect you to take me as the final word in it. I'm really encouraging you to see for yourself. And if you see for yourself exactly what I saw for myself, I think you'll have maybe less anxiety about as I said, the ambient radiation everywhere, but more awareness, as you just said, Krissy, about being mindful about having these devices really close to you, all these sources, electric cables, whatever it might be. Okay. So while we're on the subject of myth busting, another device, I was trying to find the EF testing one, but I couldn't. I don't know what I did with it. I lent it to someone. I know they returned it, but I don't know why I put it.
Right. I was going to ask if you, if you had something that you recommend, because I always go to you and like, Elwin, which one did you get?
I don't remember what it's called. If you ask me over a message later, Krissy, you can put it in the show notes for people. Remember, by the way, to check out the show notes. Always, Krissy does a really exhaustive job of making sure all the resources you need are in there, study links, previous episodes, and all the rest of it. Oh, and while you're there, just click the like and subscribe button. If you're listening with Spotify or anything, then it would be great if you could give us a quick star rating and perhaps leave a review. That would be super, super helpful to help keep the podcast going. Thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, another myth-busting one. So if you've heard about all the danger of EMFs, you might have also heard of the dangers of blue light. We've talked about that a lot in recent episodes here as well, though we've talked about how blue light is not necessarily bad, that, in the morning, for instance, it can help wake you up. Okay, well, you do get this idea, though, if you listen to certain portions of the health community, that we are constantly just being assaulted by blue light, and it's very hard to get away from it, especially in the night. And so I would recommend 2 devices to calibrate this. Let me do the positive one first, actually, then I'll do the negative one.
So, you're going to sandwich it, right?
Yeah. So, all right. So first of all, let's affirm what these people say, and then I'll also reject what these people say. So one of the things that these people say is that there's no substitute for being outdoors, that the level of light that you get outdoors. So there's 2 things about light outdoors. First of all, that it's obviously a full spectrum of light. You have everything from infrared to ultraviolet and in between. And that part of the problem is that indoors there's this artificial light. Okay, I'll address that in a minute. But one of the other things they say, and this is especially about the beginning of the day when you've just woken up, is that there is way less light indoors than outdoors. And so what I found with people is when I convey this to them, they do not really believe me. And then eventually I realized, or they do not really believe the scale at which this is true. And eventually I realized I didn't believe it either. I got a device and tested it for myself. And so you can get some. Now, your phone there are apps that do this on your phone, but I've not seen them be as reliable as a device like this one, which was not expensive. I'm pretty sure it was less than $10. This is a light meter. And so you turn it on, and it gives you a lumen reading wherever you pointed it. It's kind of a bit annoying. I think there's no way of twisting it around. Yeah, so unfortunately, the meter is the same way that it's pointing, so you can't point it somewhere and see what the reading is. But anyway, so if I point it this way, you see I've got these studio lights on, Krissy. So it's like 18 lumens, something like that. And this feels like, pretty bright lights on my face. If you look like the level of exposure or whatever, it's pretty bright. If I face it the other way, so this is like, the light coming from behind me, it's more like 3 lumens. Okay. Well, did you realize that if you go outside, even on a cloudy day, it's probably going to be like 5,000 lumens? And if it's a bright day, it's over 10,000 lumens. And that's something like right now, we're filming this, it's a sunny day outside. Okay, I just went outside there and tested it. It is a bright day, it is sunny. However, it is, 5 p.m., so it's not at the peak of the day. And it was about 7,000 to 9,000 lumens. So yeah, above 10,000.
You weren't far off, yeah.
Yeah, I think about 10,000 in the middle of the day, maybe in the peak of summer higher, and maybe closer to the equator higher. So anyway, such a different. Now it feels bright in here. Even now I'm sitting here, the light is reasonably bright. Now if I sit in here at night, sometimes I film at night, it feels really bright. But it's only 20 lumens. And it's, many, many thousand out there, even when it's a like dreary, cloudy, rainy kind of day. And that's a really hard thing for most people to get their head around and believe. And so I don't expect anyone to believe it. This is what I'm saying. Get a device, see it for yourself. I remember with my wife, Hannah, she just didn't believe it. And she generally feels worse in the winter. She kind of has a bit of SAD. And I got a SAD light, and she's using that, and she liked that. But I kind of said how much brighter it is outside. She didn't believe it, and then I showed her. And then we have a conservatory, and a lot of light does come in the conservatory. Actually, I tested in the conservatory, wasn't that different from outside because it's glass everywhere. So the glass doesn't let in the full spectrum of light. That's a different conversation. But at least in terms of brightness, it was there. And so the idea is the importance of this brightness first thing in the morning is that it wakes you up. It wakes up your brain. And that's very important, not only to feel better during the day, but also to set the circadian rhythm so you can sleep better at night and all of this stuff, which is super, super important. So again, hard to believe until you see it for yourself. Get yourself a lumen meter. Now, back to the kind of frequencies of light. You do hear, that you're just being bathed with blue light. And I bought special bulbs for most of the house that go between full spectrum light, and then there's an amber light, and then a red light. So basically you kind of switch them off and on, and they go between those different frequencies. And it is good. It's the way street lights back in the old days when I was young, they would always have a kind of orange hue to them, and these days they all have a white kind of hue to them. So we talked about this before. I won't go in depth, but basically incandescent lights, or the old types of lights, they had more of a reddish hue to them, and the new LED lights have more of a bluish hue to them, or so we've been taught. But actually, when I tested them, when I tested my special light bulbs, sure enough, okay, so I used this. This is a PAR meter, and so this is usually used for growing plants, but it's basically measuring the ratio of red, green, and blue light. In paints, it's the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue, but in light, it's red, green, and blue for whatever reason. So those are basically the visible light spectrum is contained in there, and it tells you the proportion of each. And I was surprised to see that even the normal LEDs have a reasonable distribution of red, green, and blue. They are a bit blue and green heavy, but not massively so. And there is variation between them. And then the incandescent lights, they were more red as they were supposed to be. But this idea, and phone screen, laptop screen, but they're just kind of the distribution of all three lights. So this idea that we're being bathed in pure blue light from all these devices, I don't think is really true. And actually, a lot of the time, because these days devices, they have a sunset mode, right? And where in the evening, they'll kind of naturally go for a redder hue, and you can elevate that if you want. So when I was trying to find the biggest ratio source of blue light to the other two colors, the best I could do was actually going outside in the middle of the day. The best way to get the highest percentage of blue light was actually from the sunlight. So this idea that all these devices are mainly blue light, or LEDs are mainly blue light, is not true. Now, however, at night, there should be almost no blue light. So still, just turning on a normal LED light is going to flood your body with blue light compared to how much it should have at night, which is pretty close to zero. But also the idea that every LED light and every device is just full of only blue light is not really accurate, I found out. And again, you could take my word for this if you want, but it's something that you can also buy one of these devices for yourself, and you can see it for yourself. It's good to see, especially your light environment at night. And so what I found is when I combine the two, I would create the night post-sunset environment of having devices have more red light, using the more red hue of light and stuff like that. And I saw that like the proportion of blue light in here is very low. The amount of lumens being recorded on here is very low. Like often it would be below, it would just be 0.1 would be all it would even register in the whole room. So, very low. And so that's great. And so that confirmed to me, I can stop worrying about that. It's as low as it really can be. And stopping worrying about things is quite important, in this health world. I know the average person should be worried about a bunch of stuff and they're not, but the average health enthusiast often is worried about a bunch of stuff that they shouldn't be. So this kind of testing can help you optimize it, but it can also help you relax and let go and say, actually, it's not as bad as I thought it was. It's not as bad as I've been told it was.
Genetic Insights provides cutting-edge, affordable DNA testing, giving you access to over 500 health reports that can help you in 3 key ways. They may be able to resolve your existing health challenges even when nothing else has worked. Using simple lifestyle changes, their reports can help you reduce your risk of developing future health challenges that you may be genetically predisposed to. And they can help you feel more confident in your health by showing you where you are genetically strong. Unlike most other genetic health testing companies, Genetic Insights tests over 83 million different variations in your genes, guaranteeing 99.7% accuracy across all of their DNA reports. They cover almost every aspect of health, including digestive issues, cardiovascular health, weight loss, hormonal and blood sugar balance, as well as nutrient needs, allergies and intolerances, and so much more. Using their system is quick and easy, and reading the reports is simple. If you've done an Ancestry DNA test, you can simply download your raw DNA data, upload it to the Genetic Insights platform, and within a few hours you will have access to genetic reports which give you a risk score for each specific issue and scientifically validated recommendations based on your individual genetic profile. Everything in your reports are based on scientific studies, and there are citation links throughout every report. If you are serious about optimizing your health and wellness and feeling great, then getting access to your Genetic Insights reports may be the most important health investment you will ever make. In the reports, not only will you gain insights into how to overcome existing health challenges and avoid future issues, you'll also discover which types of dietary, lifestyle, and even supplement protocols are best for your unique genetics. To get your unique genetic health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and use code REJUVENATE to get 20% off today. That's geneticinsights.co using coupon code REJUVENATE to get 20% off today. Now, in that degree of, I know we were just talking about EMFs, would you put, which one would you say you need to worry about more? Would it be the EMFs or would it be the exposure to the blue light?
Like EF, EMF, all the rest of it, or blue light. I mean, it's a question of degrees, I guess. But if you mean for the average person, that's a great question. I think for the average person, it probably would be more the level of blue light and how much that is messing with them at night. Maybe even the lack of intensity of light during the day if they're just indoors all day. So, yeah, it's a good question. I'd say for the average person, probably light would be the more important thing to optimize. Unless you're very unlucky and you just happen to be sleeping or working all day on right on top of a massive source of radiation. And then maybe you could argue it's the EMF or whatever. So yeah, a bit case by case, but I think the light is easier to resolve because I don't know if you have to, if you're a computer program and you have to be in front of a screen all day, there's not a huge amount you can do about that. Those devices that claim to reduce it, I don't find them to be effective, again, through testing. You can ground yourself at your desk, not just at your bed. So that's one thing that you could potentially do.
Do you have to put the grounding just on the feet, or could you put it on your seat, or it doesn't really matter, does it?
No, you can put it anywhere. Yeah. You can wrap yourself in a blanket if that's acceptable in your workplace. A grounding blanket, or just put your feet on it, like you said, or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I would say EMF more difficult to handle. Light environment, also can be tricky depending on your lifestyle, but it's more doable. You can put a bright light in front of you if you really cannot go outside. You can wear the blue light blocking glasses and kind of keep your lights low off at night, more easily than you can avoid EMFs, I guess.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So yeah, because if you're like, oh my God, there's all this stuff coming out. I mean, yeah, I know we've done an episode or maybe, a couple on light as a nutrient. So what I'm hearing is, really get yourself, get your nutrition fully up. So then the rest, you're more resilient to handle whatever else is coming at you.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. I was thinking that as well. Although you said it there, absolutely. That the light is like something that makes you stronger to then be able to handle all the other stuff. I talked about grounding being good at handling EMFs, but obviously getting a good night's sleep also makes you more resilient to EMFs.
Okay. So, well, those are all good things for us to take a look at, consider. But what I really love is where you said test. Because yes, you can take what people are saying or hear it, but then you're like, do you really know? I mean, is it a factor in your house? Because as well, like you said, different houses are wired differently. There could be more EMF exposure from the electrical outputs than in somebody else's house. So that might, like you said, case by case. But if you're concerned at all, get the devices. The devices are there to assist you.
And the devices I listed so far cost about $200, which is quite a lot, as I say, for a thing that you really would only test once or occasionally. But then, like I said, that's something you could potentially crowdsource or share with a bunch of people. And if you are socially isolated, I guess you could buy it and then sell it again secondhand and at least recoup your costs that way. A couple of other environmental things I want to mention, which are a bit simpler and, one of them at least, more every day, but which I still think is important. And I see a lot of people not do, even people who are worried about their health. Just this. Like a thermostat and humidistat. It's such a simple thing. But what does it do? Well, sometimes you might not be feeling good and you don't know why. And the answer may just be here. Like it may not be your diet or it may not be the EMFs or whatever. It may just be that it's really dry in the room. And that's like dried out your sinuses, or which then can cause feelings of a headache, for instance. Or it may just be that it's cold. And if you think that sounds like a stupid thing to say, like, well, why wouldn't people notice that? I'll tell you an anecdote. I remember someone who was working for me who like kept getting ill, and I try not to pry into people's lives when they do not ask me for my help, but after a couple of times I started asking a couple of basic questions, and they were talking about like in their office that they were working, they were pretty cold and like wearing a couple, several layers. And I was like, well, how cold is it? And I said, I have no idea. And I said, well, get one of these and find out. So they did. And it was like 11 degrees centigrade. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, Krissy, but it's cold. It's a pretty cold temperature just be sitting in a room all day. It's not so bad if you're moving around.
It's 51, 52 degrees Fahrenheit. That's cold.
Okay. Yeah, it's cold.
It's cold.
Now, if you have a super high metabolism, maybe that is a temperature you're comfortable at. That's possible. But this person obviously wasn't, and it was making them ill, and they were doing it to save money on heating or whatever. Not that I was paying them a little. It wasn't that. It was just, some people have that mentality where they don't want to spend money on certain things. And often things like heating, I think, are some of those things that people don't want to spend money on. And I said, I understand you don't like to spend money on this stuff, but I would strongly recommend you at least warm the room you're in to a basic level, like 16 degrees. It doesn't have to be 25 or even 21, but 11 is just too cold. So that kind of that might be a reason why you keep getting ill, and then you're spending money on herbs or supplements and the rest of it for your immune system, and it's just too cold. It's too much of a strain on your body. So it's like basic stuff like that. Often people don't realize, and same for too hot, by the way. Like some people love the heat, but I found different people have different thresholds of how much hot is too hot, where they just can't function anymore, and it does make people ill. Anecdotally, I have noticed a lot of people get ill in the heat, not the cold. Like get colds during the summer when it's hot. Like often it's sun exposure that does it to them, but not necessarily. It can just be overheating, and they get cold. Some people have noticed, well, it creates digestive problems. And going back to Eastern medicine, this all makes total sense. Like concepts like heat and cold, they would see as things that attack you and cause disease in the body. And Is that technically true? Not from a Western point of view, but it is a stress to the body to try and maintain homeostasis, to try and maintain you at a certain level. And so temporary, like cold plunge, hot sauna or whatever, may be fine, although even that is a bit of a maybe, as we talked about in other episodes. But certainly being all day in an environment that is too hot for you or too cold for you is something that you should be aware of. And as I said, this kind of biofeedback, kind of not environmental feedback, but it's like, why do I not feel okay? You know, you'd be surprised how often temperature and humidity is something that you may not afford to check. Another thing is carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. And yes, that's something you can measure too. I got one of these just because I love testing things. I can't remember exactly. So the humidistat I just sent you, I think, is $5 to $10. Very cheap. I would recommend everyone have one in a room that they spend a lot of time in. This one, I think it was $30 or something. It was a bit more, but it wasn't super expensive. It might have been less. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got it. And so I see occasionally social media posts from people who are like, oh, I realized I wasn't feeling good because the CO2 level was too low. Too high. So the room was stuffy, right? And so this is this idea it's good to have fresh air. And generally it's true that if you do not open windows for a long time, if you're in an unventilated room, that the CO2 will build up. Now, a lot of people feel worse in this situation. Is that an innate thing, or is that their own tolerance level, or is it something else? My theory on this is actually that it's something else.
What do you think? I was going to say, yeah, what do you think that is?
I think that there are a lot of waste gases that build up, even just from a human being, not including carbon dioxide, which I don't view as a waste gas. Also from any kind of organisms in the environment creating their own gases. Certainly if there's molds or whatever, they create different toxic gases, volatile organic compounds, all of this kind of stuff. If there's flame retardant things that have not fully off-gassed yet, if there's cleaning products, if people use these horrific air fresheners, which if I find them in any room I'm in and I'm allowed to, I immediately unplug and throw away. Like all of this toxic crap that's being released into the environment. And then, yeah, if you're not ventilating. However, for some people, like there are devices that can monitor that as well. So like a high spec, like expensive air purifier will not only clean the air, it will also monitor it. I got one many years ago, that does that. And so you can kind of look at it and it'll tell you what the level of toxicity is in the air. But again, fairly expensive. The CO2 meter is more of an indicator, and it just once the CO2 gets high, again, I don't personally think CO2 is a problem, but if the CO2 is built up, it means that everything else is also built up. And then it can just be, again, if you're not feeling great, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling brain fog, if you're feeling, sinus irritated, scratchy throat, whatever it might be, it may just be that you need some fresh air. And so the CO2 meter can give you an indication of that.
Okay. All right. So yeah, those are good other devices that, you may not even consider that, how your environment is affecting you. And I'm so glad that you brought up about the chemicals and the things that we have around us, that they are releasing things into the atmosphere, and that could be affecting us. I mean, I know for me, I've become more sensitive to smell, especially if people wear perfumes, or even just as much as I love them, the essential oils, if it's too overpowering, it's just too much.
I really, there are a few high quality so-called essential oils that when people burn them, I'm fine with them, but the vast majority of them, it just reminds me of like toilet cleaner or something. It's just like, it's so chemical and unpleasant. And then you read about the industry and you hear about how the vast majority of those essential oils are heavily contaminated. They're not pure at all. They've got all kinds of crap in them. So it's like kind of vindicating that I wasn't imagining it, that yes, there is the odd one that is okay. And that's probably because it is real and genuine. But yeah, really most of them aren't, unfortunately. So I agree with you. I'll tell you an anecdote about this. It's just very recent. So My wife decided to get carpet cleaning, and it did need doing. It was like bad. We bought this house from someone else, and it needed doing, but it was done, and the stench coming from that room afterwards was terrible. And it was like a couple of months before we will let anyone go in there again. It was crazy. And then, like, the last week she's been away, and she normally she likes ventilating. She normally goes around the house opening windows, and I haven't bothered. I've been busy. I haven't bothered opening windows in rooms I don't go in. But anyway, I go in the room to find something, and it stinks of that stuff still. And it's been more than 6 months, and it's like, and she can't smell it at all, by the way. Like, her sense of smell was impacted during the COVID time, as I think a lot of people's were. And yeah, a lot of people just don't smell stuff. And so again, that's where CO2 meter, again, it won't tell you everything, but it will just give you, how stuffy is the room kind of reading. So, and you might be in a house where no one has a very good sense of smell. So you might be being, mass poisoned in the environment subtly, and obviously, on a low grade all the time, and not even realize it. Or, as I said, the even crazier strategy is you kind of do smell these unpleasant smells, but rather than resolving them, you kind of mask them with some other toxic smell that you find more pleasant.
No, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, those are all good points. I know for me too, one final thing before we move on to the next bit is some new cars I get in them and I instantly have a headache. And I'm just like, there's nothing I can do for it until I get out of that car.
100%. We've never bought a new car, and it is not because we can't afford it. The Tesla Model S we've got is not super cheap. We could have definitely got a cheaper car that was new, but I would never get a new car for the reason you just said, because it takes 1 to 2 years for the off-gassing. So someone gifted me a new car, I would sell it and buy a used car. And I don't really buy, the only new clothes I buy are like hemp or linen and stuff like that. I would never wear a piece of like new cotton unless it was organic. I'd never wear an item of new, polyester or whatever, because yeah, as you just said, like they all are off gassing all of this toxic stuff into the air, and it's very obvious to those of us who have a sense of smell. But a lot of people don't. It's like one of those things. Once you're like, if you manage to survive till 90, your hearing is pretty bad. Well, what I've observed is like the average person, once they survive to the age of 40, the average smell is not very good. A lot of people just don't smell very well for whatever reason. It can be damaged by smoking, and zinc deficiency is actually a big one, and why I think COVID was why it caused the loss of smell. It kind of pushed people over the edge who were already zinc deficient, is my theory on it. But anyway, so yeah, good to get that environmental feedback. But shall we go back to wearables?
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, you really introduced me to this one, so I'm excited to talk about it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me tease over. Let's talk about the different wearable devices. So I did not test them all myself. I did not buy them, but I outsourced that to someone else to test the different devices for EMFs, RFs, all the rest of it. They were all pretty significant other than the Oura Ring. And that's really the fundamental reason I went for the Oura Ring. So most of the other things, Apple Watch, Whoop, Fitbit, they all had a level of radiation that was less than, but not that much less than an iPhone. So it is like having a phone strapped to, let's say, your wrist 24 hours a day, which is not good for all the reasons we've already talked about, all the reasons you've probably already heard about. The Oura Ring, while it is not good to have anything strapped to you, radiating you all day, every day, the level of radiation is so much less that I think when I did the calculation, having the Oura Ring on 24 hours a day is equivalent to having a phone in your hand. I think it was half an hour a day, or it might be an hour a day, but it's something like that. So it's not ideal, but it is not as bad as something that you're almost certainly already doing if you're watching or listening to this video. And so then the only question is, okay, it's bad, but not that bad, not as bad as what you're probably already doing. So then is it worth it? That's the question. The one other thing I'll say about it is, so the Oura Ring, it connects to your phone via Bluetooth, which I believe is a type of RF. But you can turn that off so it's not transmitting, so it's only kind of receiving data, which does reduce the amount of frequency further. And so if you are concerned about it, you can basically have it only collecting data, and then once a day you just kind of reboot it by putting it into its little charging station, and it will turn itself back on. It will give the data it's been collecting to the phone, and then you can turn the Bluetooth back off again. That will reduce the radiation again by a substantial amount, I believe by half. So that is a way you can get it down further. But yeah, is it worth it? What is it? What does it do? I've been talking a lot, Krissy. Do you want to talk about, from your experience, what it does, and I'll fill in if there are any gaps?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking a lot about, we know the last couple of years I've just been, had a lot of stress in my life. And so you asked me to consider wearing one of these to kind of help get myself back into an ability to be more resilient to stress. And so I was like, sure, I'm up for it. And it has been a game changer for me. It's, it measures your readiness score and your sleep score, and it gives you the feedback, and it also helps you see where your stress levels are at during the day. And that has been so helpful. It also lets me see certain things that potentially impact my sleep, which then may impact my stress ability of having resilience to stress the next day. So it's just all interconnected, so that therefore I can connect certain activities, certain things, whether I'm doing or eating or drinking certain things, and whether that's also impacting my sleep. So it's been brilliant. And it also does help me notice if I'm running too low in a certain area, that, hey, I need to slow down or just take a moment and try and recharge. Whereas before I would just push. I mean, and you saw it when I showed you my resilience score. It was absolutely flat out.
Yes. All right, so let's break this down one at a time. So first of all, what Krissy is talking about, what her and I both have, is the Generation 4 Oura Ring. I don't know what the Generation 3 was like, but I know what the Generation 2 was like. So if you used it years ago, probably the only thing that you'll remember about it, and you decide not to continue, probably the only thing you'll remember about it, and maybe other devices at the time were similar, so maybe if there was another device that you used 5 or 6 years ago, it is like that it's a sleep tracker, and then that also it's an exercise tracker. And that's all it was back then. And that's all, a lot of devices were back then. That's all, still some of them are now. So let's talk about those basic things first, Krissy, and then let's talk about some of the more advanced things that the new Oura Ring can also do. So first of all, if you have a phone that you keep on you, like most people do, you already have some of the exercise tracking thing just in the phone. I'm not sure if you knew that, Krissy, but like my iPhone, for instance, if you go to the Health app, and I'm sure there's an Android version of this, it will tell you how many steps you're walking a day, and it will tell you like your gait. You even tell you if it thinks you've injured yourself based on how much time you're spending like while walking on 2 feet rather than just on one, like stuff like that. I can't remember exactly what it tells you, but it tells you some interesting information. So if you keep your phone on you all the time, like most people do, you can get some idea of your exercise activity, specifically walking, just there. So the Oura Ring was more specifically, especially for sleep. There was Matthew Walker in his book, Why We Sleep, that came out, I don't know, I think it was close to 10 years ago now. And it really revolutionized a lot of how what I call mainstream alternative thought about sleep. I remember in the community I was in, a lot of people were into optimization and peak performance and all the rest of it. And I think before that, sleep was seen as basically a waste of time. And then after that information came in, it was like, people are like, oh my God, yeah, sleep actually matters and it is key to peak performance. And so then the idea of tracking your sleep and optimizing it, which those kind of people are into, became more appealing. So then Oura Ring was a good way to do that. So the Oura Ring will give you a sleep score and it will give you a readiness score. And so the sleep score is assessing how well you sleep. And then the readiness score is assessing how much are you recovered by the time you finished sleeping? And so this is very, very helpful. In terms of the sleep score, it's looking at how often you're waking up, how much you're moving. It gives a reading, although it's not 100% foolproof, but it gives a reading on how much time you spend in deep sleep, REM sleep, light sleep, and then also awake. It also gives some clues about maybe why you are not sleeping well. Specifically, it also is continually giving an approximation. It's not 100% reliable, but an approximation of your oxygen saturation, which we talked about in the last episode on biofeedback. And so, um, if your oxygen saturation drops and then you wake up, then that's a reasonable indication that you might be suffering with perhaps mild, perhaps not so mild sleep apnea, right? You're maybe not breathing. I won't go into the whole thing about what's going on there. We've done it with another episode, but my take is that the mainstream is not correct about this. But whatever, you may be waking up because you have stopped breathing, and then your oxygen levels go down. If that's the case, the Oura Ring will be able to see that. It's also tracking your heart rate, and it's tracking your heart rate variability. Heart rate is pretty reliable. Heart rate variability is a little bit more questionable with something that's on your finger or, in fact, wrist. It's most reliable if it's actually on your heart. But still, the original devices that were tracking that, even back 10 plus years ago, HeartMath, I think, was the company that originally was like teaching about heart rate variability and tracking it and changing it, and that was a finger clip thing. So the idea that you can only do it measuring on your heart, I don't think is true either. Anyway, so heart rate we talked about a lot on the last episode. It can be an indicator of metabolism, but it can also be an indicator of stress. Heart rate variability is more of an indicator of stress. And so the idea is that actually it's kind of counterintuitive, but the more variation there is in your heartbeat, the less stressed you are. That's the basic concept. And so like the more that your heartbeat is completely robotic and like, I don't know, like a robot has written it out like perfectly equal, that's actually a sign of stress. Whereas if there's a bit of crazy variation, that's a sign that it's doing better. So those are like the basic things that it measures. And so from that gives you a sleep score based on how long you slept, how well you slept, how much you've had deep sleep, how many times you've woken up, what time you went to bed, and what time you get up to some degree. So that's that. And then the readiness score is based on a few different things, but primarily it's based on how much your heart rate dropped, because your metabolism should be slowing down when you're sleeping. Even if you want your metabolism high during the day, it should be slowing down at night while you're recovering. And what level your heart rate variability is at. And then I think it bases quite a lot on how soon your heart rate drops. So if your heart rate drops early in the night, it judges that to mean that you are more strong. And if your heart drops later in the night, it judges that as you are more struggling. There are other factors I think it looks at, but those are predominant. Now, this is not foolproof, right? We've really talked about how your heart rate could go up because your metabolism is speeding up, for instance, not because of stress. The Oura Ring doesn't really see it that way. It doesn't understand that. So that's a limitation of the Oura Ring as well as all of these wearables, as far as I'm aware. Oh, it also measures your temperature, and it looks for fluctuations in temperature. For women, they can also use the Oura app to track their fertility, to either avoid getting pregnant or try and get pregnant. I don't think it has, the Oura Ring doesn't itself have full support for that, but it can sync with another app that like is focused exclusively on that. It can be the thing that's actually taking in the data for that purpose. So it's also tracking your temperature. And of great interest to me, actually, another thing that's tracking while you're asleep is how much you breathe, how often you breathe. It'll tell you how many breaths per minute. And I think it is able to recognize that the more breaths per minute you have, the more stressed you are, which is interesting to me. Because I've had some people, like I had a client who had really low heart rate and a really high heart rate variability, but they were still very stressed. And so that was kind of counterintuitive. They just had low metabolism. That's why their heart rate was low. I don't really know why they had the high heart rate variability, but I don't know. But but you could see that they were breathing a lot of breaths per minute, And so through that and maybe something else, the Oura Ring could still tell they're stressed, even though it didn't look like it based on the heart rate and heart rate variability. So it does seem to track enough things. I would say, and it's anecdotal, but that despite those limitations, it seems to be, as Krissy is saying, and I'm going to ask her to explain her own experience more in a minute, very accurate. So because it's kind of basing things on a baseline for you. So meaning if your heart rate is in your mid 70s rather than mid 50s, which I said in the last episode is probably a good thing, it's not necessarily going to say you're unhealthy for that. But what it will say is if your heart rate suddenly goes up, so if it's mid 80s instead of mid 70s, it's going to see that you're stressed because it's higher than usual, as opposed to just because it's high, if that makes sense. So I think that's good. And so like it finds a baseline for you first, and then it looks at the variations within that. It can even give you a notification that you are not doing well. My wife Hannah showed me a few months ago that she had hers. I had my first today, actually, Krissy. I can't remember the wording that it said, but it said like you're a high risk or something. Basically, I haven't slept well the last week and a bit. I've been kind of dealing with all the usual work stuff, which has been busy, and all the house stuff because my wife's been away, and helping my wife with a project that she's doing while she's away, all at the same time. So it's just been a lot. And I thought I'd actually been feeling good. I've pretty much, no symptoms of any kind, but it's telling me, like you're pushing it, and it was very, very helpful to see that. And I was like, okay, yeah, I need to take a little bit more of a break here, and allow more time to rest and stuff like that. Which then brings us to the other functionality that I don't know if all these other wearables have, because I think that stuff is in the other variables. Oh yeah, let's talk about activity. That's the other one. So with activity, it will also observe how many steps you're walking, or how much you're moving if you're doing other stuff, I don't know, pull-ups, rowing, whatever. And when you're doing activity, it can tell. Basically, if your heart rate goes up and you're not moving, then it says you're stressed. But if your heart rate goes up and you're moving, then it says activity detected, and you can put in, it'll guess sometimes, but it's like, are you doing housework? Are you doing weightlifting? Are you doing horseback riding? Whatever it is, you can kind of select. It doesn't have sex for some reason, even though that's a very common activity. It's not on the list, but almost every other thing you can think of, badminton or, whatever, you can find it on that list of reasons why your heart rate might be elevated while you are not, while you are active, while you are moving. And so it'll say, yeah, you burn this many calories, and you've done this many steps, and you can set a goal for that, and it will give you a score for that as well. And so those 3 scores, your sleep, your activity, and your readiness, are like the 3 basic scores I think have been there since the first iteration of the Oura Ring. And so honestly, I stopped doing it with the Oura Ring because nothing much seemed to really change, and it just didn't feel worth it for the radiation, that kind of cost benefit analysis that we were talking about earlier. But this 4th generation tells you a lot of other interesting things, which I think are very helpful. And so one of them that Krissy just mentioned there briefly is daily stress. So it doesn't just tell you, during the night, how stressed were you? Did you wake up? Stuff like that. It actually has a real time, almost. It does it in 15-minute increments retroactively if you do keep it connected to your phone. Measure of your stress throughout the day. And it will say, like, there'll be periods, and it's like, what is it? Is it stressed, engaged, relaxed, and restored? And it's got like a graph. And so, you might be having an argument with someone and it'll be stressed. And then you're sitting, and then you're having a nice chat with someone and it's engaged. And then maybe you're sitting, eating something and it's relaxed. And then maybe you go and have a nap or a meditation and it's restored. It's that kind of thing. But it's not always that. What I just said is cliche, but sometimes, like even a strong conversation might just be engaged. It's not necessarily stressful. And sometimes something that you think is not actually is, and sometimes you don't realize that activities are so restoring for you. And so it gives you also a score for the day. How much of the day have you been stressed, and how much of the day have you been restored? And that's one of the things that determines this resilience score, which we'll talk about afterwards. But I just find the daily stress to be really useful, Krissy. I one of the things I found for me is I have noticed talking to certain people like reduces my stress. Even though I don't really realize, even though sometimes I'm talking in an enthusiastic, passionate way or whatever, I'm not exactly relaxed. It still is calming to me. I've noticed some activities stress me out that I didn't realize. Um, what's been your experience with looking at daily stress? And I'll tell an anecdote.
In an ideal world, you'd meet all of your nutritional needs in the form of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, and more from the foods you eat. However, unless you prepare all of your food at home from scratch using the highest quality ingredients possible, the reality is that most of us need some nutritional support. Most of us need to take supplements if we want to look, feel, and perform at our best on a consistent daily basis. And this is especially true if you have genes that give you an elevated need of certain nutrients. And this is where Feel Younger can help. What I love about Feel Younger is that they offer a huge range of quality supplements and healthcare products formulated and endorsed by Elwin Robinson, including must-haves like magnesium glycinate and vitamins B12, D3, and K2. And they do it at affordable prices with free shipping for orders over $50 without ever compromising on quality, purity, or potency. To learn more about how Feel Younger supplements can give your health a boost while supporting this podcast, please visit feelyounger.net and use promo code Rejuvenate to get 20% off your first order. That's promo code Rejuvenate for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net. So yes, it's been extremely helpful. It's helped me identify some things I need to change, to implement, and bring into my daily life. And I'm much happier and better for it.
Awesome. Yeah, and to clarify, I think it's okay to be in the stress zone some of the time because that's life. And people who avoid stress. One of the things I found for me in Insight is interesting is that actually the days where I'm really, because sometimes life is just, you've got to just push through a bunch of different resistances, right? And it feels at a time like it's kind of stressful, but actually I notice my stress is quite low during those times. It's actually okay. It's between engaged and relaxed. Whereas times where I'm kind of like distracting myself and avoiding problems, my stress is actually high. So it's better just to get into it. And so I think you shouldn't, it's definitely not a reason to avoid things that are challenging or putting yourself outside your comfort zone. But the key insight that Krissy was saying there, which I think is super important for a lot of people, certainly people like Krissy who tend to overdo and kind of want to help everyone and all that kind of thing, is like, it's not sustainable to keep being there all the time, right? Like some time is okay, but there has to be some time where there is restoration going on. Otherwise, your level of resilience will keep going down, which is another thing they'll track, which we'll talk about in a minute. Just on the daily stress thing, another thing that was really interesting, an insight from my wife is she, like, I always get up later than her, so I come downstairs and she'll like, often tell me about, whatever it is that needs doing. And then sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to hear about that yet. I've just got up. And so she was like, oh, you sometimes you're stressing me when you come down. And we're always very nice to each other. It's not like, contentious, but, it's like a subtle thing there. And I was like, yeah, makes sense. Well, anyway, like we looked at her like stress thing, and actually her stress goes down when she has those conversations with me, which makes sense. That's, the whole women are from Venus, men are from Mars thing, right? It's good for women to vent and talk about their problems. And it just shows that it's the case for her. And actually also what we observed is, even if she doesn't tell me about what's going on, just having me around actually calms her down. And so I saw research about that, like it may be a pheromone thing. I mean, who knows what it is. But that's been really nice, and it helps her appreciate that I'm around and that she doesn't necessarily have to immediately like tell me all the problems. Actually, just chatting with me calms her down just as much, so that she's seen that for herself, which is very interesting. And so, and then this, like it's pleasant for me. It gets me up to the engaged zone, which is kind of the place that you want to be when you're awake earlier in the day, and then it gets her down to the engaged zone. So it's kind of, we meet in the middle at that level. So that's kind of perfect. So I think that's it. My key insight from the daily stress is better actually to just address things head on rather than avoiding them and procrastinating. from her, like it's better to share and connect rather than to worry about things and keep them in your head. Um, so yeah, let's talk next about resilience. So the Oura Ring then does this complicated thing where it basically tracks like your recovery scores, your daily stresses, your daily restored. It kind of puts everything together. And then based on that, it talks about how resilient you are to stress, which is really the key thing. And I love the fact that that's what it's doing, because as I said, just looking at the stress, sometimes it frustrates me talking to people, not my wife, but like clients sometimes, where they're like, oh, I don't want to do this. This stresses me out. I don't want to do that. This stresses me out. And I'm like, yes, I appreciate it. And it depends on, some people are in a position where they just have to avoid any stresses because they are really overwhelmed. So it is case by case. But sometimes it's like, I think it's not helping you to like be avoiding anything that's stressful. It would be better to address them and make yourself more resilient to that stress. So I love that the Oura Ring is actually tracking that, and I think it does it to a good level. I've been doing it about 6 months now. I find it very reliable for me when I go through periods where I'm sleeping better, resting more, relaxing more, having weekends off, for instance, stuff like that. That resilience score will just go up and up and up. And then times where I'm not, maybe I start working on weekends, I stop having breaks during the day, I don't sleep enough, whatever it might be, that resilience score just goes down and down and down. And I feel it, and I feel there's a very huge difference to me. So I think it goes from poor, adequate, solid, good, and great, something like that. It's 5 levels.
Yeah, on the resilience, mine is limited, adequate, solid, strong, exceptional.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. Yeah, yeah. So mine tends to hover between solid and strong. It's okay, actually been exceptional. I don't think it's ever been. Maybe it's been average a tiny bit, but I try and keep in that level, and that's where I'm good. Like the last 6 months I've been doing this. I haven't been ill, haven't had time off. Whatever. I've been fine, but not amazing either. It's been a bit of a struggle. It's in between. So that's kind of true to me. But yeah, like Krissy, you had been ill a couple of times, right? And I don't travel and you do, and we put it largely down to that. Like, and you're going to concerts with thousands of people regularly because your husband's a big rock star and all that kind of thing. So it kind of makes sense that you would get ill more often than me because you get a lot more exposure, you have a lot more travel, and so I just put it down to that. But then eventually, when we were chatting, I was like, God, I do think you might be low in resilience to stress because of overdoing it. And so that's why I really recommended the Oura Ring to track that and see if that's the case. And then tell us what your experience was with using the resilience score.
Yeah, so like you mentioned earlier, it takes a little time for that resilience score to get in. It really wants to accrue the data, and then it comes. And when I first started in my first one, I was in limited. Shocking. So, and
you were at the bottom of limited, right?
Yeah, I was at the bottom.
Just literally flatlined.
Done. Yeah, and you're like, that's pretty, not great. And so, yeah, no wonder I was getting ill because of that. Now, what's been happening is by being able to see the sleep score, the readiness score, my daytime stress, I've been able to then implement certain things to help my body recover. And not only just physically, but also mentally, and notice like, oh, these are the things that are going to bring me down, and these are the things that are going to bring me up. And so now I am holding in the steady, or sorry, not the steady. I wish I'm getting there, hopefully in the solid category, which is right in the middle. So, and that's good for me to see like, oh, this has impacted that. Oh, that's impacted that. Like a late meal, I know will bring my score down. But if I'm eating a bit earlier, things like that, when I'm really on par and doing the things, then I'm climbing, which is wonderful to see. And then let's say, yeah, we go out with friends, we have a late meal, I might have a glass of wine, something like that, drop down a little bit. But so then I'm like, okay, I know where I want to be. I know where I want to go, and I'm learning the things that are getting me there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Kressy's a great case study of someone who would benefits from these a lot, because honestly, every test we've done for her, It's either optimal or at least fine. Like, there's nothing that really explained her getting ill as often as she did. It wasn't every month, right? But it was just a lot more than never, which is really what we
Exactly.
want for
Yeah.
someone who is, pretty dedicated to their health and pretty strong genetically. Like, you had a lot going for you, and test wise, it always looked okay. And then eventually we're like, could it just be that she's just massively overdoing it the whole time? Because that's a hard thing to quantify, right? I've seen people who are overwhelmed having to work an hour a day. I've seen people who are fine working 16 hours a day. I mean, it's so subjective. Meaning, like, what is too much is very subjective, but actually whether it's too much is not that subjective, which is the great thing of what the Oura Ring actually shows you. And maybe other devices like it. This is the one that we have experience with, and this is the one we've chosen because of the EMF issue, as we talked about earlier. um, so and if you're someone who is in that position, who is doesn't have obvious major issues when they do other tests, and yet still and it doesn't have to be getting colds and flus. That's just happened to be what it is for Krissy, because again, she was traveling a lot and exposing herself to a lot of different organisms. But maybe for someone else it's allergies, maybe for someone else it's headaches, maybe for someone else it's depression or whatever. But whatever it is for you, if it keeps coming up and you don't find any other obvious explanation for it, or even if you do, but you feel like there might be something more to it, or you relate to some of this, I'd say one of the things that, just revealing vulnerabilities, one of the things for me was really realizing how badly I sleep. Like, I wake up a lot more during the night than I thought I did. And, there's various potential reasons for it. And I'm looking into it and trying to resolve it. And if you have recommendations to help someone sleep through the night, then by all means drop them in the comments. I'm happy to have a look and try them. But yeah, if you get back to tell me all the obvious stuff, I already do all the obvious stuff. So that's what made it surprising that it was still to that degree, and it explained some of the, like, just like what Krissy was saying, like, when it's worse, then I don't feel as good, and same as she was saying, when her stress is high and it never drops, then she doesn't feel as good. So, for Krissy, it's stress. For me, it's sleep. For you, it might be something else. One of the other things I've noticed, for instance, between my wife and I, is like, her sleep score is always better than mine. Like, she sleeps great. She never wakes up. She has plenty of deep sleep. She goes to sleep really early, all this kind of stuff. But her readiness score is quite low compared to the sleep score. Mine's the other way around. I do not sleep well, and yet my readiness score is pretty good. So, it's just different. And that is also how we experience it. Despite my relatively bad and late sleep, I wake up in the morning like, ding, feeling pretty good. I don't need coffee or anything. I'm good to go. I get on with it, whatever. I'm energized. And yet she didn't feel that way, despite having just amazingly great quality of sleep. And so we look at what's going on there and what could be causing that. So yeah, very, very helpful information. It also sends you a notification if it thinks you're really under strain. As I said, Hannah, my wife, got one a few months ago. I got my first one today. Have you had one of those yet, Krissy?
No, not really.
No, you'd see it if you, yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. And have you been ill since you kept yourself in the solid range?
No.
Excellent. Okay. So
No.
we'll update on that, right?
Yeah.
You have traveled, right? In that
I
time?
have, yeah. And I've got a trip coming up at the end of the month as well. And I'll be surrounded by a lot of people for quite some time. So, yeah, it's I'm really liking this. I'm waking up in the morning and I'm like, ooh, what's my score? How did I do?
That's good. And it goes back, your question at the beginning of part one of this is like, is knowledge a bad thing, right? Like, because I have had some people who looked at their scores, the score wasn't good, and they were like, this is just stressing me out more, and then threw the device in the drawer. And I can understand that, and as I said, it is all context dependent. In some people that is true, it's just not helping. But overall, knowledge is empowering. I think that's the main thing, and that's something that Krissy and I agree on. And actually, it was one of the core tenets for why we started this podcast in the first place, right? Is to empower people with knowledge so that although I do recommend practitioners and doctors and all the rest of it in many cases, this podcast is for you so that you don't have to have those things, and allowing you to empower yourself as much as possible. So this is another tool. It's probably the most expensive of all the tools we've talked about in the 2 episodes, and that's why I've left it till last. But it does provide, I would say, the most useful, ongoing, up-to-date, and easy. Like, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to, even with a lot of the other stuff I've talked about, you have to, kind of, there's a procedure to go through. I mean, with this, you literally wear it, forget about it, and then check your phone as and when you're interested to know what's going on. It's really as simple as it gets. I wish they were a sponsor. They're not. No one is in this episode or the last episode a sponsor, so that's not why I'm recommending it. I don't have a coupon code. I just think that it's actually good.
It's a good product. Yeah.
And if you're wearing this, if you have any device, as I said, I tested some device recently, but I wasn't that impressed. But if you're watching this and you have a device you would like us to test, I will give an honest review. So as long as you're happy with those criteria, send it to me and I'm happy to test it and do a fairly substantial review of it like I did in this episode. But again, I will tell the truth. So I guess we can finish with, what do you think? Are there any devices that you think I've missed out? Do you think, is there a reason that you think, I don't know, an Apple Watch or a Whoop or whatever is better than the Oura Ring despite the EMF? Let us know. Let us know which of these devices you already use, if you think they're helpful, all that kind of stuff. And remember to support the podcast by supporting our sponsors. Even though none of the things we talked about today are our sponsors, we kind of need our sponsors to keep funding this, to keep it going. So we appreciate that. If there's really nothing of our sponsors that you want or need, then you could also consider supporting us by clicking the join button in YouTube, a very, very low fee a month. That just helps to support us. We appreciate that as well. And otherwise, just like, comment, and subscribe. Any final words, Krissy?
No, brilliant. Elwin, as always. I mean, your dedication to health and, to where you go into research and finding these things. I'm just very grateful as well, that you suggested this tool to me, because it has changed my life. It really has. And it's like you said, the reason we started doing this podcast at the beginning was empowering individuals so that they can take their health into their own hands and know how to improve and do better. And so again, I applaud you for that and I thank you for that. So yeah, everybody, comments below, ask your questions. We're here for you. And again, it's always brilliant to share our time with you, and we thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed that, I recommend watching our latest episode, which you can do by clicking above. And make sure to subscribe, like the video, comment, and share with anyone who you think might appreciate it. Thank you.